Hi guys, Taylor Cocke here for Yahoo Esports. I'm with Jason Chayes, the production director of Hearthstone. And Jason, I really wanted to talk to you today about some of the huge changes that are coming with the Mean Streets of Gadetzan, as we can see behind you, specifically with some of the tri-class cards that are coming. This is something brand new for Hearthstone. For those who haven't seen it, head over to the site, check it out. What do you think, us being an esports side, what do you think this is going to be bringing to the competitive meta? Like, what kind of flexibility is this going to start bringing as we start revealing more and more of these cards?
No, totally. I mean, this is a particular mechanic idea we've had for a while. And one of the things we always try to do is equip our players with really cool, interesting ways to build new decks that may have not been possible previously. So the idea of being able to play as a particular class and maybe break the rules of what that class is capable of was a really fun thing to do for Mean Streets, also because it really thematically aligns with the idea of Mean Streets, which is kind of this underworld of Azeroth, where the rules are already broken. So extending that to the classes and breaking the rules was just kind of a natural fit. So some of the things you might see in this case, we just announced a card, for example, called the Cabal Courier, which is 3 for a 2/2. It's battle cry, discover a Warlock, Priest, or Mage card. And so when you have those particular options in play, you might see things like Warlocks who've always had a challenge managing their life totals, hitting their hero power, sort of drawing cards, and that's like a big fundamental part of their class identity. Now there's a chance that they get their priest card up, they get a chance to pull some healing that gives them new life and new ways to kind of push in different directions. So we're really excited about the potential for how these particular tri-class cards could shake up the ways in which some of these standard roles have existed for the core classes without completely kind of throwing those out or anything like that.
How did you choose which 3 classes were going to be in any particular one of these cards? Because it seems like they got the sort of the magey one and the fighter one, blah, blah, blah. How did those come about?
To be honest, a lot of it was initially started by just the lore and the vibe we were after. So we knew we wanted to have this kind of cloth wearer, spellcaster kind of coalition coming together to form the Cabal. And so that one was kind of one of the first ones that really made a lot of sense. We knew we wanted to have, again, Mage, Warlock, and Priest together. It really fit the identity of what the role of the Cabal was, this sort of exiled spellcasters from all across Azeroth who reformed into this kind of new group in Gadetzan. So that was kind of the first one. Then we kind of felt like we really wanted to have this group of enforcers who kind of patrol the streets of Gadetzan, and so the alignment there of having Paladin and Warrior made a lot of sense. Probably the one that was most on the fence out of any of the classes was Hunter, because we knew we wanted to have the Jade Lotus, and so obviously it made sense there to have some classes like Shaman, because there's some connections there with how they're approaching their overall mechanics and stuff. But Hunter we kind of could see to some degree in either place. At one point there was a swap that took place between Rogue and Hunter, and so ultimately Hunter landed with the Grimy Goons along with the Warrior and Paladins, and Rogue, which made a lot more sense tied to Jade Lotus, ended up there.
So the leather wearers ended up over with the plate guys for some reason.
Yep. So again, we have got to make a little liberties here and there, but we feel like the way these line up feel pretty good for the identities of each of the crime families.
So the one thing that I noticed while I was playing, I'm an old Magic the Gathering guy, and in Magic there's the sort of house cards, so it'll be tricolor in that. Did you guys take any influence from perhaps the June side of things in Magic the Gathering?
We play a lot of different collectible card games, and that's definitely been an influence throughout the history of Hearthstone to figure out what are the things we really love about this genre and how can we adapt and build on those things with what we're doing with Hearthstone. So yeah, there's a bunch of different games we look at, but for this particular mechanic, it's something that we really felt like was appropriate what we're trying to do, again, thematically with this particular expansion. And so I think that a lot of that came from just internal discussions as well as playing these other games as well.
So going back to sort of the competitive side of things, a lot of people have pointed to the Discover mechanic as an example of good RNG, and the fact that it's still a bit of RNG, but it gives you choice. Is that something that you guys are aware of when you guys are looking at creating this sort of level of RNG? Because it does seem that this set is focused much more on, it's still random, but it's giving you a little bit of choice.
It totally is. And I think our philosophies on randomness have even evolved since we launched Hearthstone. And frankly, they even evolve at very shorter micro levels when we realize that particular cards that we might be very excited about need to have some adjustments. Look, I mean, we definitely have strong feelings about randomness. We feel like randomness is very important for Hearthstone. That's where a lot of the fun stories come from. I think it's a very skill testing aspect of the game to figure out how can you manage randomness and sort of push in a direction that leads to a better board state for you and leads to a better outcome for what you're trying to do. So I think it's a very important part of the game. But I also think we've learned a lot about what type of randomness are we excited about, what are the ones like the Discover mechanic that you mentioned that we think are very good for the game. And I think even, as recently as this year, we're still figuring out how we kind of continue to tweak randomness to be in the spirit of what we're trying to do. A good example of that is some changes we made recently to Yogg-Saron, which is a card that obviously has a lot of randomness to it. And from a team perspective, it's literally one of our favorite cards we've ever done because it leads to these amazing stories that you remember. And that's what I think really makes Hearthstone exciting. Is like everybody can remember the time when Yogg-Saron did this one thing. So kind of related to what you're talking about, the most heavily deliberated nerf we've ever done was for Yogg-Saron. It's because we really didn't want to lose that random storytelling aspect of him. But at the same time, we saw, he was getting a lot of high-level play, and that's something that is, something we want to be careful about. So it's not swinging sort of a lot of the top-level matches too much. So we made some changes to him where at this point he'll eliminate himself potentially, and that does end the chain of spells that he has queued up. And that's really kind of pushed him into a better place, and we feel pretty good about where he is today.
Another example of this good RNG that's in there right now is Kazakus, who we got a chance to mess around with the other day. We played him a couple games downstairs. He seems like the kind of guy that really forces players to adapt. He does give choice. I mean, he gives 2 choices right off the bat. Like you gotta create this spell. 3, yeah. It's a lot of different variety. Is that a card that you guys are looking at saying like, hey, this is sort of the cool legendary that we want to create that is going to be it's from what I can tell, going to be very viable in a high-level competitive match?
Yeah, we really like Kazakus. We think it's going to be a really fun card to play just for players of all skill levels, and we think there's a decent chance he's going to see some high-level play. What's really cool about him is that, he is going to be different each time. You're going to see some different types of potions that he's creating as you're getting ready to figure out what's the spell that I need for right now. But what's interesting, if you kind of look at him, is just the amount of tactical different options you have with him. So if you get Kazakus late game, for example, you got your choice now. It's going to cost 4 mana to get him out onto the board, and at that point he triggers his spell crafting potion mechanic. Do I do the 1 cost potion, in which case I can still play my hero power that same turn and get the potion out? Do I do the 5 cost potion? I've got a much bigger effect that maybe draws me more cards or does more board damage, but that's all I can do that turn is get Kazakus and his 5 mana potion out. Or am I in a pretty good state, or am I need to go for the Hail Mary or whatever it is, and I'm going straight for the 10 mana potion. And so I know I'm not going to be able to play this turn, but next turn I got this immense potion that I've just been working on. And I think those type of options really give a lot of specific tactical choice to players to figure out what do they need now, given what they're seeing on the board, given what their opponent has, given their current state of what they have in the hand, and then what they know about their opponent's deck to make the best possible play.
So going off sort of the Kazakus thing, Kazakus is 4 mana. It's relatively cheap for a typical legendary these days. And I noticed in the 31 cards that have been revealed so far is a lot of the legendaries that you guys have shown off are cheaper. And there are, in general, a lot cheaper cards, specifically in Paladin right now. A lot of low mana sort of aggro cards. Are you guys looking to make this set more aggro focused? Because considering the last couple sets have definitely been leaning towards the control side of things.
We want to put in cool cards for all of the different archetypes we want to support. So there are definitely some less expensive cool cards in there relative to what we've done in the past. We also have things like I Know a Guy, which is a fun warrior spell that essentially lets you discover a taunt minion. And that can be something that can help counter against some of the aggro stuff because you're going to get a taunt fairly early on. And it could be a big taunt given that it's just a discover mechanic. We also have cards in there like Kuhn the Forgotten King, who's a 10 mana cost druid legendary as well. The most expensive druid choice card we've ever done that also can have a really big effect on the board between giving you all your mana back and giving you a chance to do something else or getting 10 armor. So really what we're pushing for here is more diversity of supporting a bunch of different archetypes rather than saying we really want to lean too heavily towards control or aggro with this release.
I mean, because right now, if you look at the high-level competitive stuff, there are a ton of control decks. It's primarily control decks. I mean, Zoo's still around because Zoo's always around. Tempo Mage is still around, but for the most part, it's a lot of late game decks that are looking to drop huge bombs late on. Is that something that you guys are happy with right now? Or do you think you'll ever be really happy with the competitive meta? What are you looking to do with it for the long term?
So happiness to us with the meta is diversity. So if it's just a control game and no rush, no early games kinds of things really have a chance to be successful, then we're not happy with that. And if it's just rush and somebody who really wants to be building up towards longer term druid play or longer term mage or whatever it is, then we think that's problematic too. I think the healthy state for us is I can make a bunch of different deck types. They all have a chance to be successful even at the very high top levels of play, because I think that leads to just the most fun play and the most fun viewing experience is just when you're seeing that kind of discovery of which types of deck matches are most fun and interesting and evolving, that we really try to push for. So I guess we try not to sort of be very prescriptive about here's the meta that we think is the right thing to do. We really think it's important the community is helping drive it in directions that are the most fun and evolving in ways that are cool. But we do want it to be dynamic, and we do want there to be diversity there. So that's really what we're trying to push towards.
The last set was obviously it's an adventure, so it's a little bit smaller. But whenever one of these bigger expansions comes out, people are really scrambling to figure out what the most viable decks are going to be, one of the most powerful decks are going to be. Do you guys have an idea? Have you ever been able to call it correctly when one of these bigger sets come out, or are you pretty much always surprised?
No, I mean, I think that we have a super talented balance team, and this is basically what they do. They spend their days looking at all the cards that we have as ideas around. Sometimes they'll say, you know what, this card is cool, but it's a little too inexpensive. We're going to raise the mana cost by 2. Sometimes they'll look at a card and say, this card is just bad for the meta. We should just change it completely. So this, again, we have many cases where we've sort of had a sense of how the meta might evolve. And we try to use that to help shape what the final version of the expansion is that all of our players see when it's actually released. So we try to get every expansion to a state where we feel like this has a chance to lead a certain decks that we like. We has a chance to sort of give some juice to particular classes that may not have had as much recently. So I mean, a good example of that is Priest. And so we made some very conscious decisions to try and give some love to Priest with this expansion.
Some good Priest cards in this set.
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited. Like, I mean, Cabal Talon Priest I think is pretty awesome. There's some other ones good that are coming out. And again, that's to your question about like how can we help how much do we think about the meta and how much do we want to deliberately push it in a better direction? Yeah, there's some deliberately very good Priest cards in there to try and help see Priest move its way up in the ranks a little bit. But beyond that, we're always also a bit surprised to see like how particular deck types might grow over time. And as much time as we put in, you know, and we've grown the Hearthstone team, there's nowhere that that's ever the same thing as the proxy for, you know, this point with the millions of players who played Hearthstone. Having to sort of see what they're capable of with teching in particular cards and tinkering with archetypes and seeing the potential of really maximizing what this deck is capable of. So we try to anticipate the potential outcome, but there's definitely cases where we're surprised, and that's exciting for us too. But it does mean that we have to kind of look at things like balance changes at some points if things get too far.
Is there one deck that you can point to that really shocked you guys when it came into sort of the highest levels of the meta?
I would say that, you know, looking at how big and how prevalent Grim Patron became at the time it came out was something that we had an idea that there was a cool idea for a deck type there, but seeing how things spread through the community and how things get picked up by just encountering on the ladder or reading about it in Reddit or watching World Championships play, when that kind of spreads to be as big and as significant of a deck type as it was, that was something that I wouldn't say we necessarily anticipated that level of growth, and so that's why we ended up making some Warsong Commander changes as a consequence of how that grew and developed.
Going off that, whenever one of these nerfs comes out, like the nerf you just mentioned, sometimes people are surprised on exactly how you nerf things. Most people expected when the Grim Patron was prevailing everywhere, that Grim Patron itself would be nerfed, except you went with Warsong instead. How do you find the right cards to nerf?
Well, so speaking again to that example, like Grim Patron is a really interesting deck, and we can chat about that for a second because it's a very skill testing deck. It's very hard to play. And we really like decks like that out there that are kind of combo decks that have really interesting potential, that are kind of new ways to play Hearthstone. You know, a good like Handlock was another example of like this. It was a really interesting deck type that's different than the sort of standard things. And that variety of decks is really good and healthy for the game. So we really like the fact that these patrons were kind of coming out and doing this cool stuff. What we don't like, and what was really the problem with Grim Patron, is doing a super aggressive burst damage. And we've seen these kinds of things happen with other decks in the past too, where, you know, maybe I'm at 30 life, I'm kind of winning, all of a sudden my opponent starts doing all this stuff and I'm dead in one turn. Like, that's just not a great feeling, and it's something where if there's no way for me to anticipate it or react to it or sort of have the tools to tech against it, it just doesn't feel like it's kind of a fun or fair way to play against the game. So that's where when we're looking at making changes to decks like the Grim Patron, we want to target the cards that are leading to those types of situations. And often that's been things that have a lot of charge in them or sort of lead us sort of giving charge to other minions, which is why we targeted Warsong Commander in that case. So the idea of the deck we like, and the strategy behind it, and the really cool aspect of the deck building behind it was great, which is why we didn't touch the Patron itself. But the burst damage part was really the problem there, and why that was the subject of the nerf.
All right, man. Thank you so much for talking to us today. We've got to go back and watch some more Hearthstone because there's very exciting stuff happening right now. For everyone else, I'm Taylor Cocke at Yahoo Esports.